All right, so we're going to take a look at your fifth lap, and we'll watch it once through here on the video, and then we'll begin a review video. When I prepare for the video, I'll take a look at the video a few times. First time looking for where you're looking, head position, or in this case paying attention to the stickers on the left side of your helmet. They'll give me a good indicator of where you're looking. Your hand position, I'll watch again for car position at speed, where you add speed, where you brake, lift, things like that. And then I'll go frame by frame and we'll take a look at car position after having an idea of the layout. And that's what we're going to do next here. But first we're going to watch the video again, and you can also take a look for the things that I mentioned and see if you find the same things when reviewing your video that I found. Great, let's get to it. Okay, and let's get to the frame by frame. So, off the start here, looks like a nice start for a Street Mod Subaru. Box is relatively close. Right here, I mean, just those have got to be the timing lights. Big open stretch. Oh, monster start. Oh. Anyway, all right. So coming through first six pack here, looking nice. Good, getting right. Breathing a little bit. So I noticed something throughout this video, and actually a couple of your other videos. You tend to be pretty far off the cones on the left-hand side. So you start here pretty close, and then gets a little bit farther away. Now I also noticed that you're shifting during this time, and I find there's another spot on the course that the shifting kind of affects your ability for car position. So we're 1.5 feet off the cones on the left, and you really want to be a lot closer, within a few inches ideally, 6 if you're being super conservative, but getting right on them is helpful. All right, so what do we have coming up here? We've got our gate we're going through here. We've got another gate with that really sharp pin turn around the corner. That pin turn is so sharp. Coming into it here, there's really not too much in terms of line choice because this gate right here limits you. Although arguably you could have set up a little bit more to the right. On your fifth lap, which was your fastest lap, you got the farthest to the left. So now we can start to see right here, those are the double cones for the pin turn, which basically comes right back on itself. And this is a really tight turnaround. Here's your downshift to second. So you start out pretty close to the cone, but as you get farther down here towards the turning point, you start to drift a little bit right. So here you're looking at about 2 feet. And this is the one that you got the furthest over. Looking at some of the other videos, you even further right. and that's going to compromise your ability to get around this cone here. The farther to the left you are, the more turning you're going to get done before you get to the double cones, meaning you can unwind sooner and get on the power sooner. So yeah, that's, I don't know, 1.5 feet at least to be able to get over. And you may be turning in a little bit early here. You may have been worth going a little bit straighter, slowing down a little bit more to try to get it turned here. One hand over hand, really trying to get turned around. That looks like a lot of lock. Brutal turnaround. Here, you want to be looking as far right as you can. I would stretch around even farther. I look on turnarounds to be with my chin over my shoulder, trying to pick up my exit cones. And I would have started the unwind of the steering wheel just a touch earlier, back on the power. Wow, that is just a tough turnaround. Very, very tight. Especially with this car, you really want to get on the power as early as you can. So you want to get your turning finished. You want to start that unwind early so that you can really use the traction to accelerate yourself. All right. So continuing the theme, looks like this goes left, and then the next gate's up on our left up here. So this is a cone you want to backside as it goes around to the other side of the track. So another one here. We're about a foot off. That one would be one I would want to be closer on. And I don't know about the right side of the car. Maybe it's the same way too. Coming around to the right here. It's perhaps turning a little bit too early, but the car does slide. So if you know the car, like that little rotation there, beautiful. Beautiful. There's your unwind. And you've got this thing almost pointed straight through the gate. Really awesome. Like that sort of entry where you get the car turned actually before you get to the cone. Great. But I noticed you drift right. Well, you steer right because it looks like the steering wheel is almost pointed straight ahead. So you started a little bit off the cone. You actually steer a little bit to your left, but we're going straight. So we're still, well, let me back up here. So you're still about 1.5 feet, almost 2 feet off that cone on the left. And again, that inhibits your ability to get this right turn done sooner. So now you're starting to turn right, and it's going to make this a tighter radius corner. It's going to take longer for you to go through it, longer for you to unwind, to get back on the gas. We got the little short straight coming up to what we call a Chicago box over here on the West Coast. Although I suppose they call that in Chicago too. I don't know what they call it up in Canada. I treat this like a 3-cone slalom. So for me, there's one cone, which is the beginning cone, the pointer cone in the middle, and then the cone at the end. Those only 3 cones that matter, and I will walk the paces from the first to the second and from the second to the third to see if I need to make any modifications to my line. Your line looks really good here, except the speed. You carry a lot of speed into this, and these are one of the elements that you want to go a little bit slower into them. So everything you're doing in terms of timing wise looks great, but I would move the entire event backwards. So get on the brakes earlier so that you can release the brakes earlier here so that you can use all the available traction in the tires for hucking the car to the left, so that way you can get on the gas the earliest. So that's what I'm talking about. There we go. Close to that cone. But we're still turning, understeering just a touch, very close to the other cone. And it delays your ability to get on the power, so you're still, the timing is very important here. Okay, I'm back on the power again. So we reach another section here. These are like, I'm gonna call them offsets. They go basically from one side of the circuit to the other. I think based on where you're looking, I think you might be caught looking at this cone instead of looking up farther ahead. So looking ahead, not getting your eye stuck may be important for you to think about or to review in some of your other videos. I only noticed it because you turn really late. So we're kind of like gently turning, and then still quite gentle, adding a little bit more. And then we get here, and then you start to like really start to turn the wheel. And then we get right up to it, and then you're really turning the wheel. So you kind of turn it a little bit, then you started to turn it just a touch more, and then you added a whole lot more. Just something I noticed. Typically that's not looking quite far enough ahead or not scanning. So even if it's just picking up what's coming up next. All right, coming around to the right, going through the gates here again, right? 2 feet off all these cones. I like to think that on turnarounds, on the beginnings of slaloms, on offsets, anything like that, every foot that you're away from the cone is 1/10 of a second. So if you're 2 feet away, that's 2/10 of a second. At Autocross, it's a game of mistakes. So typically, if there are 10 places you could have been a foot closer, maybe if you got closer to all of them, maybe 5 of them you would have overslowed by 1 mile an hour to do it, and you'd lose that same 10th that you lose here being too far away, but you might pick up the other 5. And so even if you get about half of them, you're still looking at about a half a second pickup just in distance to cones. We'll talk about how to do that at the end here. So coming again through, and of course I don't know how close you are on the right. Seems fairly close. And 103. Just keep in mind, everybody, that's kilometers per hour. But it is a track. That'd be fun. Boy, in Autocross, it would go 100. Would be quite exciting. All right. Ah, yes, the entrance to the slalom. So I would want to make sure I was farthest on the right there. Like the line. The line and the timing in the slaloms you do quite well. You do something, I don't know if it's natural or you know what to do. This is the first cone of the slalom here, and you have to turn around that cone from the outside. So I call it, the hard way getting into the slalom, and you come out enough to the right that it makes it possible for you to arc behind that first cone. So you actually put what I call an imaginary cone, so like a cone over here that you're really turning around, so that you can have the right angle when you get to this first cone. Of course, when you get to it, you're carrying a little too much speed, and so we're no longer turning. You're kind of understeering here, and that rear wheel, that driver's side rear wheel, is not going to be anywhere close to that cone. And then it's going to bind you up for the next cone and a half, which you're going to have to catch the car here. Now the front grips, then here comes your snap. Right, there's your oversteer, which now you have to catch. So you end up chasing the car through the first 2 cones, and going into a slalom perhaps a little bit more slowly so that you can really be on that first cone. I wouldn't say more slowly. So I like to, instead of using a hard brake, which sheds speeds very quickly, because you're shedding speed very quickly, it's very hard to hit that exact mile an hour. On the entrance of a slalom, I much prefer an early lift because the speed change is more slow, so it's easier to hit that exact mile an hour that I'm trying to hit, and it allows me to be very precise on the first cone. Still with that lovely arc into it, still with the turn back at the same time, but then the car is going to respond so that by the time I'm looking at the second to last cone, that I can really start focus on my timing of when to accelerate out the last bit. I will say, even all the stuff that's going on, right here you do pick up the throttle and you drive out of the slalom, which is great. So it's a good recovery out of was a little bit too high speed on the entry there. And you get on the gas. And then we're going to come around this huge sweeper. Big sweeper. Wow. This is the place right here where you want to be on the edge, you know, fighting the car. Yeah, now we're up there. So now we're looking at like 1.3. I'm going to back up just a little bit. So we're looking at like 1.35, 3.07. And then we start loading it up as you really turn in there. I mean, I think you get maybe a little bit more, and then we want to see that stay about the same. So now we start to lose it here. Car slides a little bit, unwind. You know, you really want to keep the lateral G up as you're going around. Here, it's kind of hard to see where your head is at because I think the track's bumpy there. You're bouncing around a little bit. So we've got this gate here, and I believe there's another stack of cones, a little chute, or what I call a six-pack on the right-hand side. There it is. Nice. So it looks like you stay pretty tight on the right, which is good, saving the distance. All right, so here's, and I think your eyes get stuck on it. It's very common that when there's no cones, gate, and then there's a bunch of cones here, that our eyes are surprised by it if we're not looking far enough ahead, or our eyes get caught looking at it just a fraction of a second too long. So as you come through here, really nice. All right, car's still pretty loaded up. If I look ahead, this is the limiting cone on the outside. So I would be looking for you to carry that G load out as far as you can, getting on the gas. But you're not on the throttle right now. I'm looking at the throttle, you're coasting. There's really nothing in front of you. I don't think there's any reason not to be on the power. Coasting. Then we start the unwind. Then you start accelerating. I think that could have happened a little bit earlier, especially since your car has a lot of power and you gain a lot of speed, and you're essentially straight now. And if you were lined up with this cone, that would be a little bit farther out here. Now it could be dirty out there, so that you know, without walking the track, there's no way of knowing. It doesn't look like there's too much buildup, but really being able to get on the power there, getting that unwind, keeping the speed up through that very quick sweeper is important. All right, we're gonna work down through the chicane. Okay, and the gate, this chicane I can already see is up here on our left. So good time to scan. I apply the same theory that I do to the 3-cone slalom or the Chicago box as I do to the chicane. So this is an opportunity to get everything done early so that you can really accelerate strongly out of this. So again here, based on where you've been, this is really far away. I would expect it to be even further if you were close to this cone on the right. I can see your head's down, you're looking here. Ideally, I would want to be looking all the way through this and drive this more with my peripheral vision. We overshoot the speed a little bit, and it delays your ability to get on the power. So we want to go slow in the slow sections and fast in the fast sections. So here's your slide. So this is the understeer. And all this understeer is doing is preventing you from turning the car back. Still understeering, right? Quite far away from the cone, several feet, which means you have to turn longer before you can turn back to the right, which means it's going to be longer before you unwind the wheel to get the car turned. Here, adding the power, I'm seeing the speed come up. You haven't unwound the wheel at all. There it is. Now there could be a discrepancy between the speed on the on the screen here and your actual speed. With my Race Capture Pro, it's off by 400 milliseconds. I use my shifting and my RPMs to tell that, and then I adjust it. It's the same every event, every time I use it. When I use my portable GPS, it's perfect. So some things to consider is making sure that your speed makes sense with your shifting, or your RPMs if you have that available as well, or the sound and whatnot, that it makes sense, and you can adjust it so that way that your speed is exact. So when you compare yourself to other people or other laps inside Solo Storm, it will also be right on there for you. So even though you overcook that, you still end up in a really great spot to go into the slalom. Not enough people line up where you. This is how far right you should be. I love it. I just wish you gave up a little bit more speed to be on this cone. So love the angle, totally driving over the backside. We're just, if you were turning more to the left, maybe the back driver's side would be closer, but you know, again, several feet. I mean, that is serious time. Great timing on when you turn back to the right. Love the timing. I love your aggression. But those entries, staying closer on the left when you come into them, is going to make it easier to get around the second cone and give you more. Here, I'd be picking up the finish, biding my time, being really patient. I think you start to, right here. So I'm looking at your speed as I advance. It starts to go forward. Again, if you're accelerating this early for the finish, which is up here, maybe a bit of red mist, or a bit too much aggression, because I think, you know, you lift or moderate your speed versus this being one long straight through the finish. Yeah, much closer to the cone. Nice. Power, all the power, unwinding the wheel, all the power, straight to the finish. Feel the boost. So I'm looking at your speed, 96, 97, 98, 100, 101, 102, 102, 102, 101. Yep. So here's your moderation. And you're losing speed here at 101 or 102 kilometers an hour versus those moments when you're at 70 kilometers an hour. So if there's going to be a moment to accelerate, I want to accelerate when I'm going very fast, because I'm going to cover more distance and I'm going to save more time versus trying to go a little bit more quickly in a slower section. I try to think about getting in between the elements as fast as I can, and then not losing time in the element themselves. So yeah, as we come through here, right, this should all be accelerating. Again, the speed could be off in the timing. 102, 101, 100. Wait a minute. We're losing speed. It's straight. And here, I have to imagine you're floored through the finish. If you're not, obviously there's time there. So if this is off just a few frames, then that means you got on the gas really early. Got on the gas really early. So maybe a little bit more patience there would have given you a solid run through the finish. But yeah, very cool. Very fun car to watch. I normally spend time in a street prepared car or a modified car. So it's a speed that I can appreciate. I think people underestimate how hard it is to hit your marks in a fast car, especially a fast, heavy car. The Subaru is not light. I'm sure it's lighter than stock, but still maneuvering that car, you really need to account for the weight transfer and how long it's going to take to transfer the weight. So I think there's a lot of really great stuff in that lap, and I think that there's a few things that you could do to improve your driving as well. Let's go take a look at the review, and we'll do a review, and then we'll make a plan that you can execute at the next event. Okay, let's take a look at the review. So number one, be closer to cones on the driver's side. especially any opportunities to move farther left, or in some cases right, on the corner entry. So line up as far left as you can to turn right, and as far right as you can to turn left. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but that's something I like to go by. Number 2, ease up on your slalom entry speed. Maybe coast into the slalom instead of taking such aggressive throttle, needing such hard brake. Putting the weight on the front of the car with the brakes and then asking it to turn is not going to be as effective as an earlier lift and then transferring the weight side to side. There'll be more available traction. Number 3, not enough scanning ahead. So the more that you can look ahead and take a moment to glance to see what's coming up next will help you better judge the corner exit. And knowing this is the tight corner, or I've got to early unwind, or whatever mental notes that you'd need for that next section. And number 4, moving your process of decelerating in a pinch or a chicane or the 3-cone slaloms, moving those back. So braking earlier, getting off the brakes earlier, and getting on the gas earlier. Moving that whole series back will give you more flexibility around that middle cone and allow you to get on the gas earlier. And if you overshoot it, it'll give you a little bit more oops room as well, so a little bit more room for error. Great. Now let's take a look at the plan. All right, and here's the plan. So these are the changes that you can make to pick up the time that you've left on course that we found during the review. So number 1, if you're not already, I would walk closer to the cones on the left on your course walks. I like to walk on my course walks where I'm going to be in the car. So if I'm in my Miata, I'm pretty close to the left. If I'm in the C-Mod car, since it's a mod car and there's only one seat, I'm walking more towards the middle. Number 2, when you're on your course walk, there's an opportunity to create a narrative for yourself and to remind yourself of those earlier lifts for the slalom entry, maybe around a certain point. I try not to pin it down too much because there may be some flexibility in what you guess is the speed of the slalom. If you're not already walking the distance and counting off the steps between the slalom cones, that will give you an idea of slalom speed before actually having driven it. Number 3, decide on your course walk the very challenging areas of the course, especially important areas or areas you know you may get stuck looking down that you want to bring up your head earlier. It all starts with the course walk. Especially with those pin turns, if I'm braking straight into a pin turn, I'm going to focus on glancing right over my shoulder so that way I can pick up my corner exit. It also helps me judge the speed. Number 4, if you find yourself coasting or lifting to avoid hitting an exit cone, or you just can't get to that apex cone that you want to be on, or space, or brake and pavement, or wherever you're trying to focus on, that's an opportunity to get on the brakes earlier, to release the brakes earlier, and to accelerate earlier. Or if you find that down the track there's another wiggle or another setup that you find that you have to hold your speed for, kind of like at the finish, that would be another area to kind of focus on moving everything back and really capturing that long full throttle section. So I hope this has been helpful for you, and these are pretty common things, and I would pick maybe 1 or 2 to focus on, maybe during the extra runs that you have at the end of the day that don't count. Maybe try hitting some of those key cones on the driver's side, and seeing if you really do hit them if you plan on it, or if you don't. If you get an opportunity to drive over some rumble strips or something with the driver's side, that can also help with car placement. So I hope you enjoy the video. It was very fun producing it for you, and thank you very much.